Good morning. Welcome, everyone. All right, we are welcoming our online folks too. We're live with our group that can't make it in, but I just want to say welcome to you all. It's good to be back with you. It's been such a funny couple of weeks. Being in the church is like, oh yeah, I remember this place. It's familiar. Looking forward to our time together as well this morning. Let's see here. We're going to continue our session on why won't my kids talk to me? Or you can change the the noun there. It could be why my sibling won't talk to me, or my parents, but we just want to understand the secret dynamics of families a little bit better. We're going to just give you a couple of announcements, reminders kind of thing for what's ahead. So this is for formation. We have another session on family dynamics next week. And then March 1st, we have a parish breakfast. Looking forward to having that. We missed the February one because of the weather. And then March 8th, we have formation with Ben Lowe of Arasha, which is the organization that brings us Wild Wonder, the camp that we've been doing through Marianne Inglis for many years now. So they're a Christian environmental organization that's been doing some really neat things. So he's going to be preaching, and he'll be at Sunday school. And for the young families, we have a potluck the Saturday before that down at Marianne's house, which is this amazingly beautiful property where they actually held the camp for like 5 years before I got here. And I said, let's move it to the church, because she's got horses and chickens and a creek, and it's just down in Greenville County, but it's like 15 minutes away, down 25. So that's coming up. March 15th, to be determined. We'll get back to you about that one. The 22nd, we'll have a session on dynamics of families, and then we get into Holy Week on March 29th. So it's coming up, Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. This year we're going to have a parish breakfast on Easter, which I'm really excited about. So it'll be a longer window for breakfast. People can kind of come in for 2 hours, as well as the Easter egg hunt. We also have, let me see where I can put everything. We also have back there the Lent Madness brackets. So those are on the table back there. So fill this out. Directions are on the back. And bring that in by Wednesday, or email it in to MIMS for your chance to win the Golden Halo prize and all of that. So super fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing how much I can beat you guys by this year. So we'll see. No, last year I lost, actually, so I've got to reclaim my halo. And we all have another formation offering, which is on Tuesday nights in Lent. We have Tim Ross from Johnson City, who's this great mentor and friend of mine, who's going to be talking about marks of mission, what it means to be the church, how do we engage with community, how do we tell the story of Jesus. He's a really special guy. Was anybody with him at the Holy Hikes retreat in this room? Okay, he did the Holy Hikes retreat for us, and we were all blown away by him. He's been a pastor up there for a long time. He teaches at a seminary. He's a Cherokee guy as well. So that's on every Tuesday in Lent. So please join us for that as well. So I've got another slide on that. So that's more of what we'll be talking about on Tuesdays. As we begin our formation time, why don't we say a prayer, and we'll start talking a little bit about self-differentiation. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, you come to invite us into the fullness of who you are, that we might learn who we really are as well. You give us grace to be connected with you and with one another. Help us as we learn today to grow more deeply into the people that you would have us to be. We pray this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, so let's take a moment to recap, because it has been a little while since we have been together, as you know. So we've been talking about Bowen family systems theory, and Murray Bowen found that families function in patterns even as a single organism. So the popular trend in psychology today, and then back then with Freud, and going way back, but it's same today, is that when there's an issue in a family, it's about the problems the individual has. It's about a diagnosis. You try to, let's find a diagnosis for this person, right? And that's the way we all think. And that, I'm not here to say that that's completely, useless, but what we're talking about here is that actually the ways people function, even some health problems they might have, mental health problems, or just maturity, all of this, it's more related to the family unit as a whole and how that family finds a pattern that seems to work for the family. Anxiety is shared and managed, as well as resiliency. They're passed down from one generation to another, in fact. There's a constant tension between a person's need to be together with a group of people and then their need to not be like suffocated by that group, to be their own person. And so we all live in that tension. In some families, everybody lives on the same road, right? Literally. And they all live in the same road for generations. And that's a family that tends to be more together, and that's okay. Other families, they don't talk to each other, really. And that family is more distant. Sometimes they live on the same road and they don't talk to each other. So we have this tension. The relationship between family members, Bowen wrote, constitutes a system in the sense that a reaction in one family member is followed by a predictable reaction in another. And that reaction is followed by a predictable reaction in another, and so it continues. And so there are some of these things we talked about family dynamics. So triangles form is one. When the anxiety becomes too high between two people, then a third person, we have to tell somebody else. It's really hard to manage that between two people. So we end up triangling in someone else. That can be a healthy thing, like if it's an appropriate person to talk to, or if like a married couple is having a problem and they triangle in their kid, well, that's not so good, right? Because they can find stability by taking it out on the kid or focusing on the kid, but it's not going to be so great for the kid in the long run. So triangles form. That's just how people are. And I've just experienced that and lived that. Relationship fusion is another one. That's where sometimes people's identities kind of collapse into each other. And you almost, if one person is not well, the other person's not well, right? So that's a pattern. Distancing and cutoff. Sometimes when anxiety gets high, rather than fusing and kind of giving in and losing your own voice, people just stop talking to each other because that's a way they feel like they can manage the stress. These are all very common. Focused child or the symptom bearer. This is where the family functions in a way where everything, you deal with anything by focusing on a child or an issue, particularly. So this is pretty common. If you have an only child, then that almost by default, you have a focused child. So you got to be careful not to put too much pressure on that one kid. But it's rather than dealing with the real issues, the stress of the family, you just put pressure on the kid to perform, right? Or you are obsessed over the kid's, health issues or their mental health. It always comes back to the kid, because there's this intense focus. Over-functioning and under-functioning reciprocity is really fun as well to think about. And that's where if one person in the family does way more than their job and their role, probably there's another person who's enjoying not doing their role and their job. And this, as Michael Sullivan, our guest preacher today from Cayuga, will tell you, this applies in organizations. It's like if you have somebody who's doing everybody else's job, there's other people who are like, ooh, this is great. I'm going to just take a long lunch, So oftentimes those are tied together, and they have real world consequences. So it's one thing to talk about it in a home, but we learn these functions and we bring them out. So if someone is over functioning, taking care of all these people as they grow up, then when they get into life, they get into relationships and work that burns them out and causes them lots of issues. Or people who, who have been everything's been done for them, and they can't. Parents are like, "We need you to move out, like go," and it's like, well, why would I? It's so good here. So as I said, there are 8 concepts to this, to the Bowen theory. It's a little confusing to look at all of them, but I've just touched base on a few of the ones. If you're wondering why your kids don't talk to you or why you're experiencing the weight of conflict in your family and you're feeling it, it's keeping you up at night, it's because the system has led to a situation where someone's distanced, right? Someone's pulled away in order to manage what's going on in life for them. And so understanding those dynamics can be really helpful. So one of the examples that we talked about, this is a genogram. This was a story that I shared in previous sessions, just again to try to get your gears turning again since we've been out for a couple weeks. This was a situation where there was an intense focus on the oldest daughter, Caroline. And so the married couple, Michael and Lindsay, they had a good rhythm to focus on her. That was like what they did. Put a lot of pressure on her to perform, and she was very successful because of that. The standard bearer for the family. The middle daughter had ended up having mental health issues and was almost in a way trying to get attention from the parents, right? In some way, like, hey, look at me and I'm here also. And so as Michael got more tired and worn out by his wife's obsession with their oldest daughter, he realized that their marriage was very distant. And he decided to work on that and to refocus his attention back on his wife and his other kids and even his granddaughter. And so that was not welcome news for his wife, who was locked into this conflict with his daughter, but over time it ended up resulting in these triangles changing and becoming more sustainable and healthier. So differentiation of self is that work that, in that example, Michael did. This is one of the big concepts, and this is kind of the answer to the question, okay, so there's family systems, well, what can we do about it? Well, you can work on your own emotional maturity. This is the work that an individual does to differentiate oneself from one's emotional systems. It's how we focus on our own functioning, even to a fault. Like we really take responsibility for self, defining who we are, thinking through, well, what are our values? What are our convictions? What do we believe our role is in these relationships without taking on the anxieties and the pressures of the whole family system? So it means learning to think clearly even when our hearts are racing in the midst of a conflict. It means being non-reactive when everyone is flipping out. And sometimes, like I was talking to someone recently who, I can't even remember who, I think it was a parent, and I said, sometimes the best you can do, how we always hear people say, don't just stand there, do something. Well, in family systems, it's the opposite. Don't do something, just stand there. Isn't that interesting? Just stand there and see if you can not react to what's going on. And just manage yourself, right? And fake it a little bit. Because oftentimes when you're in that heightened mode of anxiety, what you're going to do is going to be dictated by the system. It's not going to be helpful. You need to be able to think clearly again, which is why one of my principles is that if I'm feeling reactive, then I don't respond for a day. I'll take 24 hours until I can feel that I've calmed down a bit. Understanding your family of origin, though, how you're raised, is really important to how we realize we're actually functioning and how you work on more maturity. So that's why we keep going back to that example. All right, so here's a real example that I want to share with you, because I know this can sound very abstract. So I want to give you some concrete things. So two grown sisters have very different relationships with their parents. One sister has always been faithful and tried to take care of her parents, even as they aged. The other one has struggled with mental health and addiction her entire life. When the parents pass away, the faithful daughter needs to make plans to lay them to rest. And I say faithful in quotes, right? The faithful daughter. So the parents, in this case, they had left clear instructions about what they wanted to be done for the service, where they wanted to be buried, and even what they wanted each daughter to do in the service. The problem was that the faithful older sister had no way to get a hold of her younger sister, who had distanced herself for years. The last time she talked to her, a few years earlier, she was in a halfway house in the Northeast. So she tried over many months mailing letters, using old phone numbers, contacting friends, right, to try to track her down. But nothing allowed, searching for obituaries, couldn't find her. So she was about to hire a private investigator, but she decided to meet with a therapist first, who listened carefully and began asking questions about the history of the relationships and the family dynamics. So the older sister realized that she was always taught to care for her younger sister. The therapist observed that it sounded like the younger sister did not want to be found. But the older one responded, "My parents always told me to look out for her and that we had to take care of her because life was harder for her." Growth and self-differentiation came when the therapist said, "Yes, that was your parents' wishes, but now they've died. So who is making you take care of your sister now?" "I guess I'm realizing it," she said. "I guess I'm the one who's making myself do it," she said. "What would you like to do next then?" the therapist asked. "I'd like to go ahead and have a service for my parents and lay them to rest." And so she did. And it was good. And so through that careful work, right, she was able to stop carrying the weight of the burdens that were really affecting her well-being. So that's just a fun story, a true story, an example of how this kind of work can really make a difference in life. I'm going to show you a chart now. I don't want you to get too worried about this chart, but this was a way of trying to diagram what self-differentiation is. So I hope it's helpful. And rather than make it, I just took a picture of it from a book because I'm trying to not spend hours and hours making charts for slides. So what this is a diagram of self-differentiation, okay? And so the higher up on the scale, it's just 100, is where someone is thinking more. So they're going through life with clear thinking, and here this is like a man and a woman, and they're connected, but they're not fused together. So on this side, there's less anxiety, there's less relationship fusion, there's fewer life problems, better decision, often better health even, less concern about the opinions of others. And then if you go down the scale, this is where emotions rule everything, and where we kind of live and breathe by how we're feeling. And here you can see the example is two people and they're a little more fused. More anxiety, more relationship fusion, more emotional fusion, more life problems, poor decisions, concern about others' opinions, and all of that. So Bowen thought that most people only functioned, most people were not very high on the chart, we'll say. And that they function on the lower side of things most of the time, but with a lot of work, they could begin to think more clearly and to function up on a higher level. Or what's interesting that I've learned in working with a lot of older folks through this lens, people who have been doing this for decades, that they say, you see the benefits in your grandkids. So like a little bit of maturity from somebody in one generation, it might not feel like it's a game changer for themselves, but as it goes down intergenerationally, then the maturity starts to grow. Just like Bowen thought that he thought you could predict when a schizophrenic person would be born about every 10 years or 13 years in a family where there was so much intensity that somehow it would manifest in this huge psychological issue because of the fusion and the intensity and the conflict and the way people couldn't separate from each other was being passed down as well. So the work pays off one way or another. And so I'll just tell you a little bit more about this, and I thought we could even fill this out together maybe if I can use the board here. One way that's helpful, again, because we're thinking about the thinking side of our brain versus the feeling side, right? So one way to talk about that is that we all have this like reptilian side of our brain that is really important, right? Let me see here if I can figure this out. Nope, I didn't want that. Oh, I see what happened. Back, maybe? Wait for it. Okay, cool. All right. So let's move this maybe. Okay. So the reptilian side of your brain is the side that keeps you alive when things are a little scary. So I'll give you the first one. This is what we might call fight, flight, or I like to add freeze. Because you might not fight or flight, but you might know what it's like to freeze. When anxiety gets really high, right, this is like, keep me alive. Like I'm going to punch back, or I'm going to, just freeze and go away for a little while. And this is all kind of like what we do. This is what animals do. This is what we do. And so the more thinking side would ask, instead in those situations, they might ask like, well, okay, what are my options now? Or even, what's my role here? Well, that's really different, right? And learning to try to train yourself to be aware of your own reactivity is part of this work of self-differentiation. So what are any other things come to mind that people do when they're operating out of the more emotional side or the more reptilian side of your brain? Do you have any examples of that? Whether it's a physical reaction or just a concept? Any thoughts? Yep.
Would immediately verbalizing be an example of a reptilian brain?
Yeah. So it could be, yeah, just like saying something. Yeah. So just reacting. Yeah. Being very reactive. Blurting something out, etc. Yes, it could be. And so then maybe the counter to that, as we're trying to contrast, would be a non-anxious presence. Or if this is more helpful, I just thought of this off the top of my head, would be curiosity. Right? So something happens where you're reactive, and now you ask a question with curiosity. Oh, okay. Well, what are you thinking about this? And rather than trying to fix it or trying to, insert that motherly advice. Thank you for sharing that one. All right. Other things that come to mind that are the more reactive things that you might have read about in a book somewhere that some people might do? Yep.
We were talking about defensiveness to criticism.
Right.
Consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, being defensive.
Passive aggression.
Ooh. Yeah. Yep. Passive aggressiveness, or resentment. Yeah, and so maybe an interesting way to contrast that would be to clarify your thinking. So when you're feeling defensive, or you're feeling resentment or passive aggressiveness as the emotional reaction, then what if instead it was, okay, let me see actually what do I think about this situation, and how would I articulate, right, in the middle of a conflict or something, how would I say, here's what I think I'm going to do, and let them deal with it, right? But in order to do that, you have to oftentimes get your heart to stop racing a little. You have to start being able to actually think clearly. These are good. Yeah. Yep. Ann? Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Road rage. Yeah. It's like the ultimate example. Right. Yeah. Violence and rage. Yeah.
Kind of the opposite of that, emotional shutdown.
Yep. Or shutting down. Yeah.
Jumping to conclusions regarding someone's intent.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one we talk about too is, um, yeah, like assumptions about others. Oh no. This is harder than it looks, folks. So this comes up a lot in family systems. And the contrast to, because what we end up doing is we assign stories to other people's functioning and why they're doing that. Man, I can't believe this person said that. They're such a whatever, or they're always, and the contrast I think there is to focus on your functioning, right? And your intent, rather than letting it be other people's functioning. That's like, what it's all about. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter why the person is coming at you in an upset way or why they're calling you names. The question is, can you function in a way that doesn't allow their angst to be yours? Right? So is there a way I can stay in touch with that person, maybe hear them, listen to them, but I don't want their life issues to become mine, right? I want to work on myself and my own family. And so, their reasons are often less important than we think. It's more about how the anxiety is trying to travel. So with a lot of case studies with family systems, we don't get into the why question, like with the sisters whose parents died. It's, why won't your sister get a hold of you? It's about, okay, so for some reason you're feeling the weight of the responsibility for your sister. What would it look like to not feel that weight anymore? What would you do? You'd say, okay, well, I've tried to contact her for 6 months. I think I've done my part, right? I haven't moved. She knows where to find me. I'm going to go ahead and do what I'm called to do here. Yeah. Yeah, these are really interesting. I find even violence and rage, I find with parenting, that's incredibly hard with disciplining young kids. And I think that's one of the reasons I feel really uncomfortable with spanking my kids, is because if I'm upset, I'm not thinking clearly. And having lived it, having at least one very challenging kid, I've tried everything to get her to obey me.
Wilder, right?
Yeah, it's Wilder, totally. And so, I've literally tried everything, and I know that using spanking won't work to get the behavior to change. I literally have tried everything.
Sometimes it doesn't, it has the opposite, it makes it worse.
It makes it worse, yeah. And then being honest about when I'm reactive, right? So now you're upset and you're trying to much less, if someone's in a road rage situation or something like that.
I don't believe in spanking people with violence like that. I never did that with my children. I just don't believe it.
Yeah, and that was exceptional for your in that time, probably, right?
Doesn't mean I'm not mad at them.
Yeah. Somebody else said something.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, so this is this is kind of fun to think about, right? Is the challenge is to acknowledge when you're reacting and to try to be a clear thinking person, right? Like the emergency responders in the room, you train people to go into situations where the anxiety is through the roof and to not react. Because what happens, even if they show up and someone's like, this is happening. If they don't read the situation, then they can miss the really important thing that's about to make it a lot worse, right? Or they can be in danger themselves because they let the panicking person dictate the next step. But the theory is telling you, this is hard to hear, that in order to be non-reactive and to shift from this more reptilian way to this thinking way, to go up the scale of self-differentiation, that it's going to involve work with your family of origin. So again, we try to do this kind of on our own, but it's saying that you might go and talk to, a sister who who might have a take on why your parents drive you crazy, right? To go to people and talk to them about it, or try to be present with people in your family of origin that in a way that's different than what it's been locked in as. That's really how we make progress with that. And that's really hard to do. And that can seem very counterintuitive. I'm curious about this. What if when we look at the Gospels, Jesus is oh, thank you. See, can I just clear? Okay, awesome. So what if when we looked at the Gospels, Jesus is an example of someone who lived with self-differentiation like no one has ever lived before, meaning that he didn't compromise who he was at any point, and yet he stayed in touch with people in a way that allowed for community and relationship and family. So this is, we don't have time to read through all of it, but if I can go to this. This is from John chapter 7. I just find this example really interesting. This is John chapter 7. Let me get another hand on this. So we're not going to read through all of it here, sorry, it was catching up. So this is just a situation where Jesus is, he goes to this festival, and people are not happy about what he's saying, and there's conflict brewing. And so, like you can read right here, it says, well, no one would speak openly about him for fear of the leaders, basically. They were looking for him, it says in verse 11. Where is he? And there was considerable complaining about him among the crowds. And so they're asking, well, who is he, right? And the tension's kind of building as he's saying, who he is and his relationship to his Father. So officers are sent to arrest him. So they send the temple police right here to arrest Jesus. And Jesus, right, he continues to teach and to talk. And the people go back to the leaders, and they have that great line where they go, well, where is he? Did you bring him? And they're like, well, no one's ever spoke like this guy before, right? There's that powerful line there. So if we keep on going down, then what we see is the temple police went back to the chief priests, and that's where they ask them, and they say, no one's ever spoke like this. And they go, well, you haven't been deceived by him also, right? And so then this is kind of neat, right? So self-differentiation. It says each of them went home, and Jesus, it says that he went to the Mount of Olives. So he pulled away by himself for the night, which we talked about a lot with our theology of wilderness. Early in the morning, he came to the temple again. All the people came to him and sat down and began to teach. The scribes and the Pharisees, they figured, okay, well, now we'll catch him. And they brought a woman who had been caught in the very act of adultery. They made her stand before all of them. And they say, this woman was caught committing adultery. The law says you have to stone her. What do you say? They said this in verse 6 to test him, that they might bring a charge against him. And then this is really curious, right? Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. Such a weird little verse. Isn't that something? When they kept questioning him, he straightened up, and he said to them, let anyone who is without sin throw the first stone. And once again, in verse 8, he bent down and wrote on the ground. It's the only time we know that Jesus actually knew how to write. It's kind of interesting, this little passage. When they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders, and Jesus was left alone with the woman. Jesus straightened up and said to her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? And she said, no one, sir. And he said, neither do I condemn you. Go on your way and sin no more. It's just an interesting thing I've been kicking around for years. I've never had anybody that was silly enough to listen to it like you all are. But it seems like he was managing his own reactivity in a way, and that he was somehow navigating a really tense, escalating environment where he was refusing to give in and to become swayed by the emotional system of his religious tradition, his community. All right, so I'm going to just give you some questions, and we've got to go. So these are questions to ask yourself before we pick this up for next week. Where am I walking on eggshells with my family? Where do I get the most intense, anxious, or upset when being family? When am I willful, controlling of family members, or very attached to particular outcomes? I find I get very anxious when I'm attached to a certain outcome. I need for it to happen. Who is the most emotionally mature person in your family? Who is the least? Where have you tried to fix or negotiate a relationship between two other people? Because what we know about triangles is that's not a great idea, to try to take responsibility for two other people's relationship. What are my core priorities and commitments? What are your values, your core priorities and commitments? So I'll leave these up here in case anybody wants to flip through them. But we'll be back next week and we can maybe have a little more chatting and a little more conversation about that. But I hope this was useful for you. If you've already been to church and you don't mind stacking some chairs, there's a group that's meeting right after the 11 o'clock for lunch. And that would be wonderful if y'all could pull aside chairs, so they're going to have lunch for like 10 or 12 people. Thank you guys for your time. I hope you'll come back next week. Appreciate it very much.